Welcome back to Real Disc Golf Simulation. If you've watched our other videos, you've already learned that we use the TechDisc to find the furthest flying disc, not only for me, but also for other players. And I would say it's been fairly successful. One of our viewers asked us if we could do something a little bit different. If we can find the furthest flying disc, could we also find the most accurate disc? When I think of an accurate flying disc, I'm always thinking of a fairway drive. For this shot and trying to get the most accurate disc, what we ended up going with was a stock hyzer. I really didn't know how we were going to do that with the TechDisc. So they have a lot of cool features. We're going to jump into some of those here today, but it ended up being a lot more work and a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. So why don't we go ahead and jump into it, and we can talk about some of the features I thought might work and then what we actually ended up doing. So we'll get TechDisc loaded up. All right, so we have the TechDisc loaded up here. We're going to jump into throw sets, and the throw set that we're actually going to use here today is our rock throw set. So if you guys remember, we recorded this one out in the field. We were throwing at a basket, so we had a set target. We were really focusing on being accurate. So I think that's a great one to use today for our accuracy test, and if we can find the most accurate flying disc. It's going ahead and loading up here. And if you remember, inside throw sets, it does this really cool sort of scatter plot where it shows you where all of the discs ended up going. And my original thought when I was asked if we could find the most accurate flying disc was we could just use this. So we have the throw set, all 10 throws are in here. And if I come in here, I should be able to change the disc, right? Which I can, and then go ahead and simulate that throw set again. And my hope was that it would show me all 10. I could just see if they were still tightly grouped together or if the change to the flight numbers ended up causing the discs to disperse more. Unfortunately, when you change the flight numbers inside the throw set, it only shows you one throw. I'm not sure which one of the throws, maybe it's the average, but it's not showing us the full grouping anymore. So unfortunately, that option was thrown out. I then later realized that if you go into an individual throw, you have both the simulated option, which we have right here, and we know that off to the side we get the overhead view of it, which is helpful for determining how accurate the throw is. But if you go into the flight path of the throw, it also gives you the apex in terms of height, it gives you the total distance, but if we look here, it also gives you the left to right distance. So with this information, total distance and left to right, we can figure out how far from a target that disc actually flew. Unfortunately, sort of a similar situation here of if we jump back into the simulator, which it's just taking a second to load here, maybe not, maybe it's stuck. I think it might be stuck. Here, I'm going to refresh. All right, here we go. So if we jump back into the simulator, and if you remember what that number was, I don't anymore, but the number left to right, or actually this is 246, right? Total distance. So if we go ahead and increase the speed of the disc, that's going to change our total distance, so it's not going to be 246 anymore. I lied, it is still 246. All right, let's change the glide and simulate. So we made this like a brick. There we go, 198. So now if we wanted to understand what the flight path was so we can get the total location of the disc, if we jump back in, we see it goes back to the original, the 247 by 64 feet over here on the side. So we can't use this to modify the disc's flight numbers and figure out which disc is more accurate, right? So neither of the two options that are standardly provided are going to end up working for us, unfortunately. Now, this did give us some good information for what we did end up doing. We did end up using this 64 feet measurement as sort of a base to understand the left to right distance discs were going. So now let's get into what we actually did to figure this out. So Once again, this probably isn't going to load because we broke it, so I'll refresh. And if we come back to the simulator here, we'll let that load. And while it does, I'm going to show you this green translucent sheet. And you can just barely see on there that I have created a grid on this green translucent sheet. So I overlay that on my monitor with this section right here, this overhead view of the throw. And since we already know what the distance from here to here is and what the distance from the start to where it landed are, we can use this to determine the exact location of the disc. I ended up overlaying that on my screen, modifying the flight numbers of the disc, and then simulating the throw over and over again. That gave us information that we can then use to find the most accurate flying disc that's available. Now, when I think of an accurate flying disc, I'm always thinking of a fairway driver. I don't know why that's the case. Maybe a mid, but fairway comes to mind even more. It's definitely not a high-speed driver, right? So we're not looking for high-speed drivers. We're not looking for mid-ranges today. We're going to focus on finding the most accurate flying fairway driver for us based off of the throw set that we had with that Innova rock that we were throwing out in the field and throwing near the basket. We've already found that the TechDisc does do a good job of simulating other discs based off of the throw of a different type of disc. So going from a mid-range to a fairway, I don't have much of a concern with that in terms of the data that we're going to be using. All right, so here's all the data that we ended up collecting as a part of this. We have 9 discs that we ended up testing out, so different flight characteristics entered into the simulator, everything from a 6-speed up to a 9-speed. I'd say standardly that's what most people consider a fairway driver, and we have different ranges of stabilities and weights in here. We then go ahead and put each one of the throws, so we had 10 throws in our throw set, so we put each one of the throws into the simulator, used our fancy translucent overlay to measure the distance between where the disc landed and the point that we were going for. For this shot and trying to get the most accurate disc, what we ended up going with was a stock hyzer. So the basket was placed 300 feet from the tee and then 45 feet to the left. So for a righty, that should give us a good right to left where we're throwing on a stock hyzer. So we don't want something too flippy. We're not necessarily trying to throw straight. We're trying to throw straight with some fade at the end of it. And to me, that's the perfect stock shot for what we had done with that rock, where we have a lot of discs that are thrown on hyzer and fading out at the end. All right, so all of these measurements are the distance from the actual point. We have left to right, so that's the distance from the center line to the left or right of the center line, or I should say the basket's center line, because again, that is 45 feet left of what the true center line in TechDisc was. And then we have the total distance from where we threw it to the basket, or the distance away from the basket. Okay, so now we have all of that mapped out here over our 10 throws, and that gives us our final data over here. So these are the averages. I was able to use that distance that we had found in TechDisc to convert those numbers into feet. So we have the average feet away from the basket for each one of the different discs. And then I went ahead and did a little bit of algebra and determined the actual distance from the basket to the disc. So basically it should be a right triangle. So we used a little a squared plus b squared equals c squared. It's the first time I've done algebra probably since being out of algebra. So that was pretty fun. But we get actual distances here, and I have them sorted basically in closest order, which gives us this 6, 4, -2, 173 got us the closest to the basket on average across our 10 throws. So you can see what the other options are. You know, the 7, 5, -2 did pretty good as well. You know, it's 26 feet, so that's not half bad either, but definitely somewhere in between a 6 and a 7 speed looks like it's going to be our best option here. So what we're going to do is just like we had done before, we're going to jump over into Infinite Disc's website. We're going to put these flight numbers in, and we're going to see if it can find us no, I almost said furthest flying disc. We've already done that. This is, can it find us the most accurate mid-range for just a stock hyzer throw? Okay, we got Infinite Disc's website loaded up here. We're going to go ahead and put in those ratings that we were talking about. So we had 6, 4, -2, 173. So 6 to 6. We'll do the glide at 4. The turn was -2. TechDisc determines the fade for us, so I'm going to leave that alone. Looks like it says 22 discs are in here. Now, from what we've found in finding the furthest flying disc, that probably means that there's only one make and model available. So I'm going to be very interested to see what that disc is. And then we might just widen our search range just a hair to try and get us some other options that we might test against it. So let's go ahead and see what we got. Oh man, the anticipation is killing me. It's loading forever. All right, here we go. That's crazy. The Innova Cheetah. So according to a combination of TechDisc and Infinite Disc's advanced search criteria, the disc that's going to be the most accurate for me in terms of a fairway driver is going to be the Innova Cheetah. Now, the Cheetah is something that I threw, I don't know, ages ago. So, I started playing disc golf in 2004, and I would say I probably threw the Cheetah at some point during the first 3 to 4 years of playing. So, I probably would have given that up in 2008, 2009, that time frame. That is when I got into leagues and things like that a lot more and kicked out a lot of discs that I was throwing in favor of discs that were more popular with some of the better players at that time frame. But the Cheetah was something that I did throw early in my disc golf career, and I have to say I'm sort of shocked to see that this is the result that we ended up getting. So we're definitely going to end up buying a Cheetah, and we're going to take that out to the field and see what it looks like. But I'm also curious if we just widen the search results just a little bit, what else we can end up getting. All right, so we're back in Infinite's advanced search criteria. Like I said, I'm just going to widen the search results a little bit. We'll keep it in a 6-speed because it seems like in our results, the 6 ended up doing a little bit better. We're going to change the glide a little bit to give us a little bit more glide, and hopefully that widens the range just a little bit. And then the other thing I think we should do is just widen the turn range a little bit. So we'll go from -2 to -1.5 just to try and get us some more results. And we see that ends up getting us 285 discs in our criteria. So we definitely have something other than the Cheetah in here. Let's go ahead and load this up and see what we ended up with now. Okay, so quite a few other molds here. So still have the Cheetah in there, which makes sense. It also opened up the Leopard for us, which, the Leopard is something else that I threw a lot back in the day. I've replaced the Leopard with the Discmania Essence, which I like quite a bit. The flight numbers on the Leopard are 6.5, -2.1. So I would say it's still in a decent place for what we were looking for. So if we compare it, the only real difference is we've increased the glide by 1. So when we're using the flight numbers from TechDisc, the fade doesn't matter as much. So the only difference in the flight numbers that we get from TechDisc is the fact that the Leopard is just a little bit faster. Other discs that are in here, I've thrown the MVP Relay before. Didn't hate it, didn't love it, nothing like that. I have not thrown, I don't know how to say this, the Gyro or the Stig before. So to me, it's probably going to make sense if we want to put something up against the Cheetah that we end up going with one of these two that we haven't thrown before. It looks like there's 66 of the Stig available and 17 of the Jowl. Let's go ahead and load up the Stig. Let's see what the flight numbers on that are. 6.5, -2.1. So looks like basically the same as a Leopard. And let's just see the jow, what we have there. 6.5, -2, 1.5. So it seems like these are all very close to each other. 6.5, -2, 1 compared to 6.5, -2, 2. So I think the jow might be the better option just because it puts this fade number just a little bit closer. We were looking for something in 173. Do they have anything in that range? Close enough. I mean, we can get something. No, they don't. So let's go back to the Stig and just see what they have there. So the Stig has some options in the 173 range. So I think we're going to end up buying a Stig and a Cheetah off of Infinite's website. We'll get those shipped out and we'll take them out to the field. We'll set up the basket at exactly 300 feet out, 45 feet to the left, and we'll throw a bunch of backhand drives at it, and we'll end up seeing which one of these discs ends up being more accurate for us. Hopefully you can do a test like this too at home. It's a little bit more work than what we had to do for the furthest flying because we did have to make this translucent grid sheet. I think you can actually buy translucent grid sheets and you don't have to make your own. But it would be cool if TechDisc unlocked some of the features that would allow you to do something like this on your own through their software without having to make a grid and put it on your screen. If this is something that you've tried or you find interesting, make sure to comment and subscribe to the channel here to see what happens when we take this disc out into the field. Thanks for watching.